If you haven't heard yet, Adventure Time creator Penn Ward's new show, The Midnight Gospel, is coming out on April 20th. A trippy show coming out on 4/20/2020? Pretty on the nose there, Netflix. That said, this show looks insane, y'all, and the only way to prepare for its weirdness is to watch even more weird stuff. I'm Whitney Van Lanningham, and these are the most psychedelic episodes of Adventure Time. Number 10, King Worm. Wanna watch 22 minutes of an amalgamation of all your nightmares? King Worm is an arguably trippy, disturbing, and eerily familiar feeling. I feel like I've had every type of nightmare depicted in this episode, and I'm sure you have too. Like, for example, the subtle difference where Dreamscape Finn's hat ears are just a little bit longer than usual. Finn's dream begins with him waking up in the Candy Castle to Princess Bubblegum calling him her king and husband. Finn knows that something is off, but he doesn't quite realize what it is yet. The banana guards are upside down, PB's face is on the back of her head, and he catches her whispering to Peppermint Butler that he doesn't know he's dreaming. He sees a glimpse of a little green-striped worm with a crown on Princess Bubblegum's shoulder, and thinks he recognizes him, but he doesn't know where from. The next thing Finn knows, the scene has changed and he's outdoors with Flame Princess. How many times have you basically teleported in a dream, but it seems totally normal to you? It happens in my dreams, like, always. Flame Princess force feeds Finn some soup, and when he opens his eyes, he's back in the tree fort. Unfortunately, the comfort stops there, because Flame Princess's eyeballs morph into mouths right before she changes into Peppermint Butler. Pet-Butt explains to Finn that he's trapped in a dreamscape, and that the only way to get out is by catching and breaking the green worm he saw on Princess Bubblegum. Finally, Finn spots Jake in a nearby upside-down room, wrapping presents with Lady Rainicorn. Lady now has two mouths, one of which apparently doubles as a tape dispenser, and Jake admits to Finn that he doesn't think that she's real. He pinches Finn just to check to see that he's real, and explains that he thinks they're in a shared dreamscape. As Jake plays the viola for Lady, one of the music notes morphs into the crowned worm again and slips through our hero's grasps. Finn decides to give lucid dreaming a try, and produces a magic sword out of thin air. Unfortunately, his subconscious fears cloud his mind, and the sword transforms into a giant shark head. But thankfully, Jake gets him to calm down by warning him that if he jacks up the dreamscape too much with his subconscious fears, the whole thing will blow apart. After shrinking down to the worm's size and following him through the mouse hole in the wall, Finn and Jake emerge in a field where the Ice King is fleeing two gigantic monsters made up entirely of penguins. It's both horrifying and adorable. They run away until they reach their dad in a clearing, and are sucked into a psychedelic fever dream watching Joshua knit a green striped scarf. The scarf, of course, turns into the worm, and the boys chase it up a snowy mountain, dodging lumpy space princess hail as they ascend. At the top, they find the worm completely frozen and use a rock to break it into pieces. Breaking the worm wakes them back up in their beds, and at first, everything seems like it's back to normal. Until you realize that Finn's hat's ears are still extra long, and that his mirror reflection is an image of Farmworld Finn. To his horror, Finn realizes that even Jake is part of the dream, and that he's still locked in by the worm. He pinches Jake, and Jake's body melts into a pile of bones and yellow fur. Suddenly, the worm rises from Jake's remains and proclaims that Finn cannot defeat him. He explains that he is the King Worm, and that he has trapped Finn in this dreamscape forever to steal his life energy, and that there's nothing Finn can do to stop him. Luckily, Finn remembers Jake's advice. In order to blow the dreamscape apart, he'd have to summon his worst ever nightmares. Finn begins conjuring his deepest, darkest fears, beginning with the ocean. Salt water begins pouring out of his belly button, followed shortly thereafter by the Lich. Finn manages to dodge the Lich's blast, but he can't emotionally handle it when Princess Bubblegum emerges from his button to have lunch with the Lich. She taunts Finn, saying that he's too young for her, and Finn flips out. He summons the ghost lady Shoko to his belly button, and uses the last of his strength to squeeze a clown out of there too. All of these things combined give him the heaviest of jeebies, and thankfully the King Worm shriveled up and slinked away from the tree fort. Number 9, Hall of Egress. This Emmy Award-winning episode is basically Adventure Time's Bird Box, and one of my favorites. While adventuring one day, Finn and Jake stumble upon a mysterious cave. In a bummer twist, the dudes get separated, and Finn is left to figure out the mysteries of the Hall of Egress alone. He remembers that Egress means exit from one of his lessons with PB, and feels certain that if he can find his way through it, he'll be able to find some kind of backdoor to let him back outside to Jake. But every single time Finn tries to fight his way through the cave, he ends up right back where he started at the entrance. At first, he tries drawing himself a map, but all the exits turn out to be booby traps, and every time he opens his eyes, he's immediately taken back to the opening. Even when he finally busts out, finds Jake, and goes back home to the tree fort, as soon as BMO or Jake force his eyes open, he's right back in the cave. Finally, Finn accepts that he's never going to escape the Hall of Egress, and Jake and BMO are never going to stop prying his peepers open, so he runs away. Miraculously, all of his instincts lead him to a cave in the desert, very similar to the one he initially found in the forest. But this time, something feels different. When he opens his eyes, he's no longer in the Hall of Egress, but rather a clear passage where the hatch used to be. In the distance, he can see Jake looking for him amongst the other animals crawling all around him. As Finn breaks into a run, he hears Princess Bubblegum's voice telling him that at the center of the seashell lies the cornucopia's smallest door. He once again busts through the top of the mountain besides Jake, only this time he's really escaped. Number 8, Come Along With Me. I couldn't list the trippiest episodes without talking about the first half of the series finale, Come Along With Me, simply because of the scene where Jake unleashes the nightmare juice on Finn, Gumball, PB, and himself. Inside the unconscious world, anything you can imagine is possible. But unfortunately, Finn and Jake's idea that everyone would just work out their issues in the nightmare zone don't quite work out the way that they planned. Gumball and Peebles are still trying to take each other down, and Fern starts attacking Finn. Feeling left out without a doppelganger, Jake summons Jermaine, and it instantly gets distracted pretending to work at a restaurant. Alright, first of all, those eyeball clouds are terrifying as hell. Second of all, I would not want to fight whacked out pterodactyl Fern. Luckily, through the power of therapy, aka unlocking their repressed memories and shared torment and facing them together, they both attack the grass demon holding Finn hostage and kill it. But without the demon, Fern has no body and begins to deteriorate. Meanwhile, Gumball and PB are still jousting with toothbrushes in the mouth of a dream beast. Gumball shoots her beaker of dum-dum juice with a blow dart, and Princess Bubblegum regresses back into a tiny baby bublet. Gumball tries to build his own kingdom within the unconscious world, but realizes that everything he builds is crumbling around him. PB tries to help him, but in her candified state, all that she can do is a little dance. Which really makes you wonder about all the candy people we've seen in the series. When they wake up from the dream world, Princess Bubblegum apologizes to Gumball for imprisoning him as a stupid punch bowl for so long. But when he steps forward to accept her apology, Aunt Lolly trips him, and it's revealed that Gumball had more dum-dum juice that he definitely planned to pour out on Peebles. In his betrayal, Gumball accidentally douses himself in the juice and returns to his punch bowl form. Good riddance. Number 7, A Glitch is a Glitch. Desperate to get Princess Bubblegum to go on a date with him, the Ice King decides that he's going to create a virus that will glitch out their universe and slowly delete everything from existence until the two of them are the only beings left. While Finn and Jake are drawing pics of the Ice King on their computer at the tree fort, Ice King sends them an email attached to a brick that smashes through their window. When they open it, they see a super disturbing, gross video of a woman eating her own hair. I don't know what the hell kind of fetish that is or what porn site it was found on, but I want it deleted from my memory ASAP. Suddenly, a glitch comes out of their computer and Jake and Finn finally realize that something's really wrong. The boys dash to the Candy Kingdom, where they find the Ice King insisting that PB promised to go out with him if he was the last guy on Earth. He explains that the virus is in the universal source code, and that soon everything will be gone. Finn and Jake rush off to save the candy people, but to their horror, everyone starts glitching out and falling apart in their arms. Their friends are slowly deleted one by one, so Finn decides to jump into the universal source code to find the glitch. Upon entering the USC, everything gets trippy, glitchy, freaky, yo! Finn and Jake notice hexagon blocks with images of a spider and a snake on them. When Jake places the two together, they combine to form a giant freaky hybrid. Finn realizes that these are the building blocks of the universe and warns Jake not to touch them, but lol, the glitch is actually right behind them, devouring everything in its path. While Peebles is making out with her own hand and trying to get Ice King to give her the antidote to the virus, the glitch takes one of Jake's arms and makes Finn's body disappear until only his head is left. Floating in the vast nothingness of their almost deleted universe, Finn and Jake remember that weird, disgusting video of that girl choking on her own hair, and decide to replicate it in order to make the glitch barf up all the hexagon building blocks. Luckily, that shiz is truly disgusting, so he ralphs up the whole universe and everything slowly starts going back to normal. Except for the Ice King. He's currently stuck in a house that glitch phased back around him, getting his ass kicked by that snake-spider hybrid. Number 6, Pahoy. Depressed because Flame Princess didn't laugh at one of his jokes, Finn climbs deeper into his pillow fort to avoid Jake and BMO and stumbles upon a hidden secret door. On the other side is a world made entirely of pillows where the people, plants, animals, and everything in between are completely pillified. Finn meets a beautiful pillow girl named Rosalind at a nearby outdoor dance party. It turns out that she's the daughter of the mayor of Pillow World, Quilton, and the two end up getting married and starting a family together. Finn and Rosalind have two pillow children named Jay and Bonnie. When Finn is middle-aged and his children are young, Quilton comes to him with news that archaeologists have researched the door back to Finn's world, and that it will only be open for a short amount of time. After searching for many more years, his children are nearly grown, and Finn and his wife are also clearly getting older. Finn finally finds an oracle who speaks to him in riddles. When Finn returns to his family, his wife lovingly tells him that she knows she has to let him get back to his other life, and that she's always known that she'd eventually have to say goodbye to him. She begs him not to forget her or the children when he returns to Oo, but Finn has a false flashback of Jake telling him convincingly to stay with his new family. Finn grows old with his wife and children and decides to leave the door behind for them. On his deathbed, Jay, Bonnie, and Rosalind gather by his side as his spirit takes that sweet, sweet DMT trip across the universe. Apparently, that's what it's like when your brain releases the chemical dimethyltryptamine when you die. So hey, at least your last moments will feel like you're smashing through a kaleidoscope. Interestingly, Finn's old man spirit runs smack into Galb. This is the series finale's big baddie's first debut, and while we have zero idea who he is at this point in the series, we do know that he exists in a place between worlds. Unfortunately, when Finn pops back up in the tree fort, he can't remember anything about his life back in Pillow World. That devastated me because his wife obviously loved him so much and she begged him to remember his family, and he literally has no idea that he fathered 2 children or committed his life to someone he loved. Number 5, food chain. Even the intro to this ep is all whacked up. When Finn and Jake go on a field trip with the Candy Kids to the Natural History Museum, Princess Bubblegum gives them a boring lesson on the circle of life, aka the food chain. She explains that the caterpillar eats the leaf, then the birds eat the caterpillars, then bigger birds eat the little birds, then the bigger bird dies and becomes rich, fertile soil in which a new plant can grow. Finn and Jake say that they're bored and try to leave to go to the snack bar, but on their way there, Magic Man hits Finn with a spell that transports him to his own personal version of the food chain. Finn and Jake suddenly turn into 2 small birds and sing the electronic version of Mozart's The Magic Flute. When they finish their duet, Finn and Jake land near an oasis, and Jake starts eating caterpillars like there's no tomorrow. Finn tries it, but he thinks that they're kinda gross and pukes them back up. But soon enough, Jake and Finn are gorging themselves on caterpillars and get too fat to fly. This is a problem, because out of nowhere, a big bird decides to dive bomb them and they can barely get out of the way in time. Luckily, before Finn gets eaten by the big bird, Magic Man appears and turns him into the big bird. But there's a pretty problem here too, because now he wants to eat Jake, who is definitely still a small bird. He tries to trick Jake into letting him eat him, but luckily Jake flies away. Finn is too emaciated to keep flying and dies on the ground. Next, Finn is turned into hundreds of tiny bacteria that excitedly devour the bird's corpse until only a skeleton remains. So yeah, Finn's eating himself? I guess? Technically? Jake agrees that it's gross. Their cells are swept away by the wind, and Jake and Finn grow into beautiful little flowers. Their life cycle is explained via the auto-tuned song We're Plants, detailing their journey from plants to caterpillar food to caterpillars. Under the hot desert sun, Finn meets a beautiful lady caterpillar named Erin. He and Jake rescue her from heat exhaustion and take her to the oasis. The 3 eat a bunch of leaves and Finn and Erin fall in love. Dang, Finn, you still don't even remember your pillow wife and now you're getting a caterpillar wife? That's cold, man. Finn and Erin are about to be married when suddenly their wedding is interrupted by another Finn bird eating them and their wedding guests alive. But before the bird can swallow him, Magic Man transforms Finn back into a human. Weirdly, it turns out that Jake didn't get hit by the spell, only Finn, which I thought was kinda wild. Compelled to share his newfound respect for the food cycle, Finn tries to sing a song explaining it to the kids at the museum. Sadly, they find it just as boring as they did PB's lecture, so the moral of the story here is that little kids are dicks. Number 4, Is That You? This episode revolves around time travel and features Prismo, the Wishmaster, who had been revealed to be the psychic manifestation of an old man and was destroyed by the Lich prior to this episode. Is That You begins with Jake and Finn performing a dream ritual over the last of Prismo's pickles. They finish up and quickly go to bed so that Jake will be able to visit the memory of Prismo in his dreams. The next morning, Finn wakes up and finds Jake talking to himself and doing odd things in the front yard. He slowly realizes that Jake is reenacting his memories, but when he tries to intervene, Jake immediately explodes. Finn figures that this is because he's throwing off the reality of Jake's memories, so he waits for Jake to re-experience last night over again. This time, when Jake goes to sleep, Finn stays up to see what happens. He sees his bud disappear in the now glowing pickle jar and quickly runs after him. In the other dimension, Prismo is alive through the power of Jake's dreams. They reunite and Prismo leads him to the world's comfiest bed, where Jake promptly falls asleep. As soon as he passes out, the real Prismo is resurrected and reappears. Prismo stops Finn before he can catch up to Jake and takes him to where Jake is sleeping. He He explains to Finn that he needs to wake Jake up and bring him back to the version of Prismo still waiting in the hall. If Jake is willing to give up one of the alternate dimensions of himself to bring Prismo back to life, that version of himself just has to remain asleep in this dimension for the rest of eternity. As we've seen, there's like a ton of versions of Jake, so he agrees to help his friend. Prismo then tells Finn to go stop himself from waking up Jake. He doesn't know what'll happen if Finn confronts another version of himself, but Finn is also willing to risk one of his lives to save his best bud's best bud. Finn races into the next room and stops himself from waking up Jake, which causes himself to explode and turn into the Finn sword. So, Prismo's alive, one version of Jake is permanently asleep in an alt dimension, a version of Finn has been transformed into a sword, and the two boys are back at the tree fort. Man, time travel in alternate dimensions always freak my brain hole, but this one felt extra wacky. Number 3, the mountain. One night, the third incarnation of the Earl of Lemongrab lay awake in bed after performing a day of lemony duties and routines. He decides to get up and go for a ride on his lemon camel to the Mountain of Matthew, where he embarks on an introspective quest. Lemongrab seeks the answers to 3 questions. What is his greatest desire? What is his greatest fear? And who are his past selves? Through the ecstasy of ego death, the mountain offers Lemongrab the opportunity to form his own identity and find meaning in his life. The answer to the first question is easy. Lemongrab desires to be accepted by his quote-unquote mother, Bubblegum. In doing so, I imagine he hopes to find out who he is, despite the fact that he's been sewn together from the parts of 2 previous Lemongrab clones. His greatest fear appears to be Lemonhope taking over his kingdom and being better apt to solve the problems that he couldn't. Finally, he sees the previous Lemongrabs fighting over his doll, Lemon Sweets. He chooses to rescue Lemon Sweets, but is too small, and Lemon Sweets ends up swallowing him. He ends up in a greasy lemon plain, where Matthew tells him to lick the grease. He licks it and realizes that he's sitting on his own nose licking himself. This is when Finn enters the Mountain of Matthew after him, and his journey leads him to entering his past life as a butterfly. He then finds himself running endlessly on his own arm. I have no idea what Jesse Moynihan was smoking when he made this storyboard, but it looks strong as hell and I want some. In the end, it turns out that the mountain strips you down to your pure essence, which he then absorbs when you agree to become one with him. He says that he's waiting for the second age of terror when he will emerge in his final form and restore the world. But then Lemongrab destroys him by throwing a handful of Lemon Johns into Matthew's mouth, and they get the heck out of there. Number 2, Another Way. This episode is truly jacked up, so if you get bad vibes from clowns, maybe skip this one. After Finn and Jake break their toes, Jake hires a team of clown nurses to come take care of them at the tree fort. The clown nurses insist on healing our dudes by smooching their busted tootsies, and while Jake seems to be in some kind of Quentin Tarantino foot fetish paradise, Finn is not having it. And I don't blame him! No means no, you freaky clowns! He tries to block it out by disappearing into his mind, but the clown nurses are even there, menacing as ever, insisting that Finn do it their way. Screaming like a bat out of hell, Finn breaks free from their clutches and races off to the center of the forest, where he hopes to find a Cyclops with magical healing tears. He reaches a fork in the road, where a little stump guy tells him that he has 2 choices. He can either go to the left and lose all of his hair forever, or he can go to the right and be incredibly stinky forever. Finn has a bad acid flashback to those scary-ass nurse clowns, kicks the stump sign over, and plows through the center of the path, once again screaming. When he emerges from the brambles all sliced and bruised up, Finn realizes that he needs to cross a river to get closer to the Cyclops. Unfortunately, a bush friend warns him that the current is crazy strong, the water is acidic, and that the river is teeming with electric eels. The bridge nearby is also a trap, and there's nowhere for Finn to cross. Of course, once again, he totally snaps back to the moment where the clown nurses robbed him of his dignity and totally flips out. In one of the most messed up moves I've ever seen on this show, Finn uses the bush's body to bat the water and eels away from him as he tries to sprint across the river. He completely fries the bush down to barely a stick and then skips his course like a stone across the remainder of the water. It's at this point that you start to wonder, is this an episode about the cycle of abuse? Because Finn's tootsies were assaulted with clown kisses, now he's hurting other people in return? Do they have therapy on Ooh? Because Homeboy needs to see a therapist about this pronto. In another act of nearly psychopathic brutality, Finn crushes the wife of a small hairy forest dude. Finn goes mad with the power of doing things his way and smashes the dude's cart, causing a watermelon to roll downhill and flatten his wife. After singing an auto-tuned song about how whack his day was, Finn finally stumbles upon the Cyclops. But by now, Finn feels too guilty to try to get the Cyclops' tears, much to the Cyclops' surprise. The Cyclops refuses to believe that Finn doesn't want his tears and punches him into the earth. Luckily, Finn's confidence in his way returns, and he fights back, stealing the Cyclops' eyeball and healing himself in the process. He races back to undo all the collateral damage of his rampage. Finn returns to the tree fort and offers the tears to Jake, but Jake's like, nah man, this is a WikiFeet connoisseur's dream come true, and keeps getting his piggies kissed. Finn learns the valuable lesson that everybody has their own thing, and that you should just let people do what they want to without getting involved. That being said, what did Jake and the clown nurses learn about consent and safe medical practices? Nothing? Because it really feels like they learned absolutely nothing. Number 1, no one can hear you. No one can hear you still gives me nightmares, and it's from season 3. A freak deer is running around the Candy Kingdom licking all of the citizens when Finn and Jake try to intervene. The deer straight up snaps both of Finn's legs in 2 places, then yeets him into oblivion. When Finn wakes up in the hospital, everyone has disappeared and only Jake remains, scrounging through dumpsters and living in a makeshift tent in the middle of town. Jake's behavior is definitely the second creepiest part of this episode. He tries to convince Finn that everyone is just hiding out, waiting to jump out and surprise him for his birthday, but after a few days, Finn realizes that there's something really wrong with his buddy. It turns out that he's been in a coma for 6 months, and Jake has a traumatic brain injury. When Finn tries to figure out what the math is going on, Jake imprisons his friend, ties him up, and forces him to listen to a puppet show. Finn dives into the sewer where he believes Jake is holding the candy people hostage. What he finds is a disgusting web of melded candy and that goddamn creepy deer. It's like if Bambi went rogue and became a cross between Pennywise and Hannibal Lecter. In truly the most disturbing act of all time, and the number 1 freakiest part of this episode, the deer takes off its hooves to reveal little hands. That's so gross! Make it stop! I hate it, I hate it, I hate it, I hate it. Luckily, Finn is able to snap Jake out of his zombie trance, allowing him to free the candy people while Finn battles the deer. Jake then drops a cinder block on the deer's head like KO, and the candy people push his soon-to-be corpse into the sewer, where he presumably drowns unconscious. And somehow this is still rated PG. These are the episodes that I think are the trippiest, but I want to know what you guys think in the comments section. Like and subscribe to Nerdwire, and remember, never trust a deer with tiny hands.